The most calming moment was when I realized that healthy love didn't increase my anxiety, and that initially scared me. Dear daughter, it's nighttime, and the silence feels heavy, as if every shadow is listening. I'm writing this for you to recognize the signs that serenity brings, even though it sometimes feels boring. Back then, I thought intensity was synonymous with love. Chaotic moments made me feel alive. However, when someone entered my life and began to create space, I hesitated. The pattern of yelling and misunderstanding started to give way to calm conversations, and that made me question if something was wrong. I was so used to the storm that the calm felt strange. Then, in one of those moments of tranquility, he said to me, "I just want to know how your day was." I smiled, but inside there was an echo of distrust. How could a simple question be enough? Intensity had taught me that love needed to be ignited. But there, in that moment, I realized that security had its own kind of beauty. That's when I recognized that, for me, stability felt like boredom. The idea of peace didn't spark adrenaline, and that made me restless. Love shouldn't be a battlefield, but for so long I confused that with passion, and I didn't realize, until someone gently showed me, that true connection can be soft, like warm summer breezes in the afternoon. So listen closely. Sometimes the green flags are quiet. If you notice the comfort in being exactly who you are, pause. If you realize you can resolve conflicts without raising your voice, pause. And if anyone ever shows genuine interest in you without any strings attached, take a deep breath. This isn't boring. It's liberating. In the next account, I will share the moments when security became a challenge and how I learned to navigate those uncharted waters. The calmness, which once felt strange to me, slowly began to transform into something familiar. I started to notice the little things, the way he smiled when I talked about my passions, or how he leaned in slightly to hear every word I said. Silence was no longer an absence of noise, but a safe space where we could meet without pressure. But there was a voice inside me, always whispering, questioning this new reality. Is this really love? I wondered. The fear of normalcy began to consume me. What would happen if this serenity was just a passing phase? Every time he came closer, I felt a flutter in my stomach. What was once adrenaline was now apprehension. It was on an ordinary night, while we were lying on the couch, that everything became even clearer. The turned-off television reflected the soft light of a candle on the table beside us. He turned to me and asked, "What do you dream for the future?" A simple question, but it caught me off guard. I wasn't sure how to respond. For so long, my plans had been shaped by the expectation of tumultuous relationships. And now, I was faced with a man who just wanted to know about my desires, without the need to turn it into a dramatic spectacle. And then, I didn't realize that I was drifting away from the answer. My mind wandered, lost among emotions I couldn't express. I was so used to fighting for attention that the idea of being heard without conflict was, in a way, frightening. The silence hung between us like a thick fog, until I finally said, "I don't know. I've always been so focused on surviving that I never thought about living." His expression changed. He smiled in understanding, but he didn't seem upset. And in that moment, I saw for the first time the difference between being loved and being cared for. His affection didn't manifest in the intensity of conflict, but in silent patience. This felt like uncharted territory, and I hesitated to step in. That's when insecurity began to emerge like a ghost. I felt guilty for not bursting with happiness. How could I be with someone who offered me peace, but still feel a storm inside? The conversations began to flow, but my mind was in constant battle. If I didn't react emotionally, would he pull away? Was this just another pattern I was repeating? And then, in a moment of vulnerability, I opened up. "I feel like I'm losing passion. It's strange." He looked deeply into my eyes and responded, "Sometimes true passion is just a calm love. You don't need to yell to prove that you love." That statement pierced my heart like an arrow. Here he was, challenging the notion I carried about love. I was scared. The feeling of control that came from emotional roller coasters was being replaced by a new kind of mastery, one that involved the conscious choice to stay and not run away. However, that didn't mean I wouldn't feel fear. The fear of opening up, of letting go of the defenses built over years of emotional confusion. The green flags I noticed weren't just there to make me feel safe, but also to remind me that love requires courage. It wasn't just about accepting compliments or affectionate gestures. It required the courage to allow oneself to be vulnerable. And this, my daughter, doesn't come without pain. So, if you ever find yourself at a crossroads, remember, serenity is not synonymous with boredom. It can be an invitation to explore what it truly means to love and be loved, away from the chaos we often associate with passion. And if you feel the pressure to be intense, take a deep breath. Sometimes, the deepest love can only flow in calm waters. In my next account, I will talk about how I learned to maintain this sense of security, even when fear threatened to shatter this new structure I was building for myself. Serenity became an internal battleground. I was caught between the need to love and the fear of not fitting into this new way of living. With every shared laugh, a shadow of doubt grew within me. Was this really love, or just a temporary calm before the storm? I remember one afternoon when we decided to do something simple: cook together. The kitchen light filtered through the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere. The smell of garlic sizzling in the pan enveloped us, and I felt the warmth of his presence beside me. But deep down, the restlessness whispered again. What if he was just being kind? What if, behind all that calm, there was an unspoken expectation? "Do you want to do this or that?" he asked, while I struggled to decide what to choose. It was so simple, so ordinary, but the act of making decisions felt monumental against the emotional weight I carried. And then, amidst the frying and light conversation, I realized there was an abyss between what I was experiencing and what made me comfortable. At the end of that day, as we washed the stacked dishes, the tension erupted. "Why do you get so hesitant sometimes?" he asked, not out of anger, but out of curiosity. His tone was calm, but his words cut like glass. My eyes filled with tears. I wasn't sure what to say. I don't know. That was when the truth started to emerge from its murky depths. The idea of being vulnerable terrified me. For years, I had kept a shield around my heart. Past loves were traps, filled with hurt and misunderstandings. I had learned to protect myself. What he was offering was a break from that pattern, and I was terrified. "I feel bad for not knowing how to love this way," I whispered, my voice faltering. He looked at me as if he could see the core of my struggle. "Loving is also about learning," he replied calmly. "There isn't a right way to do it." That statement echoed louder than any shout could have, but fear still nestled in my heart. And then, silence returned to fill the space between us. Once again, the calm that should have brought comfort became a heavy pressure. What would happen if I couldn't do it? What if, in my attempts at gentle love, I ended up breaking everything? That thought haunted me. In the days that followed, I looked deeper. The little things began to speak. The way he took care to ask about my day, the kind gesture of holding my hand while crossing the street, the warm smile when I shared a silly idea. It was as if I were learning a new language, one without shouts or dramatizations, but filled with subtleties, with meanings hidden in the lines. But along with that, there was this insistent voice: "Be careful, don't get carried away." And then, on a quiet night, when we were watching a movie, he turned to me and said, "If you feel ready, I want to know your fears." His words hit me like a wave. Could I finally be honest about how I felt? I took a deep breath, hesitant. I wanted to be brave. "I feel like I might disappoint you, that I'm not good enough," I confessed, vulnerability exposed like an open wound. His expression changed. There was no disapproval, just a deep understanding. "You will never be a disappointment to me. Your truth is your strength." Those words broke through the protective barrier I had carried with me for so long. I began to realize that feelings of inadequacy were shadows from the past. True love didn't require perfection, but presence. He wanted to know who I was, and in some way I started to want to show that. In this process, I learned to see this calm love as a strength, not a weakness. It wasn't a prison, it was a shelter. Serenity was an invitation to expand, to grow, and to explore parts of myself that had been dormant. My fears didn't disappear, but gradually, I found ways to face them. So, in a moment of clarity, I decided to open up. "Let's talk about what scares me." He smiled gently, encouraging me. And so we began a new dance, no longer a battle between us, but a dialogue about our doubts and insecurities. I wanted you to know, my daughter, that it takes courage to love. It's not just about giving or receiving. It's about opening up to the possibility of making mistakes, learning, and growing together. Healthy love isn't perfect, but it's a place where your imperfections can be embraced. Sometimes, serenity brings forth your ghosts, but it's also in that calm that you can discover what it truly means to love and to be loved. In the next account, I will explore how I turned those challenges into opportunities for personal growth, even when doubt threatened to extinguish the new light I had just found. Serenity, that strange and liberating feeling, continued to challenge me. It was a space where I could be myself, but fear still lingered like an unwanted guest in my mind. And so, that dance of vulnerability and insecurity unfolded, revealing new layers of a relationship that I wasn't sure I could sustain. It was a sunny morning when we decided to take a walk in the park. The fresh air held a promise of renewal, but my mind was clouded. With every step we took together, the doubt that insisted on following me echoed. What if this calm love is really just a facade? What if one day he wakes up and realizes I'm not that special after all? He spoke about plans for the day, but while his words flowed with enthusiasm, I felt my heart tighten. As we walked, I spotted a child playing with his dog, running and laughing. The scene touched something deep within me. I remembered how childhood was filled with simple and sincere moments, where joy came naturally. But as we grow older, that purity gets lost amid dramas and expectations. And then, I didn't even realize I was already overthinking. I zoned out of his conversation, trying to focus and absorb that moment of tranquility. He pulled me closer and, amid the movement of others around us, asked, "What do you think holds you back from fully opening up?" I froze. How could I explain the labyrinth of insecurities I had built up over the years? So, with a trembling voice, I replied, "I fear that calmness is a sign that I'm being superficial." He stopped, looking at me with a gaze that seemed to penetrate deep into my fears. Calm doesn't mean superficiality. Sometimes it's quite the opposite. Calming the internal storms is an important step to truly connecting with each other. I was overwhelmed by a wave of emotions. It wasn't just a matter of security. It was an invitation to rediscover the essence of love. Each step on the trail felt lighter. However, a persistent shadow still lingered over me. As we talked, I began to notice the little things. The way her hair danced with the wind, her hands moving as she spoke, the way her eyes sparkled when she shared stories. It was a new language of love, this calmness, and I was slowly learning its nuances. And then, I wondered, why did I fight this so hard? It was on an autumn night that the change began to solidify. We were at home, wrapped in blankets, watching a movie. The soft light from the screen illuminated our faces, and a comfortable silence filled the air. But instead of feeling relaxed, restlessness crept back in. What would happen if, in a moment of vulnerability, I revealed all my fears? "You look deep in thought," he commented, breaking the silence. I felt my heart race. I knew I needed to be honest, but the idea of completely exposing myself stirred up a whirlwind of emotions. "It's hard for me to be so calm," I replied, my voice barely audible. "What becomes of that?" He turned fully toward me, watching me with a tenderness that seemed to cut through the fear. "Sometimes we just need to sit together and acknowledge our uncertainties. That's not weakness, it's courage." That line echoed in my mind, creating waves of resonance. I was about to discover that love was also about respect, the raw, naked truth. In those weeks, I decided it was time to face what was hidden. I had to learn to deal with the truth of my vulnerabilities. It was like a patchwork quilt, each piece representing traumas and fears from the past that kept me from diving into this peaceful love. Courage wouldn't come without effort. So, one day, I resolved to talk about what truly troubled me. That day, over coffee, I looked into his eyes and said, "I'm scared. My fears are always there, ready to sabotage me." He held my hand, a simple yet powerful gesture, and encouraged me to keep going. "Talking about it is the first step," he said calmly. "You don't need to worry about being perfect or having all the answers." Tears began to slide down my face, an unexpected relief in light of the pressure I had felt for so long. He listened attentively, without interrupting, allowing me to release all the weight I had been carrying. Over time, I realized that every time I shared a part of myself, even the darkest ones, he not only accepted it, but celebrated my honesty. I learned that love wasn't about having everything under control. It was about opening the door and making space for others to enter the more complicated parts of our being. Even if the path was filled with stones, there was beauty in the journey. With every word exchanged and every story shared, I was weaving a new pattern, a pattern where vulnerability was not a burden but an act of courage. One sunny afternoon, as we soaked up the sun in the yard, I smiled and said, "Maybe serenity is more powerful than any storm has ever been." He smiled back, and in that moment, I knew I had found a home. In the next account, I will explore how these challenges transformed into opportunities for growth, leading me to recognize that loving can indeed be one of the most courageous acts we can perform.